higher the energy. But we also have one that's electrostatic detector, which was showed on the documentary, where it allows us to actually hear those energy fields. So when we reach an area where the energy field is higher than it has been, we can actually hear it rather than just see it.
Have you seen a ghost?
Yes. Many times.
What's your typical stereotype ghost look like? Give me if one of them appeared in this room, what would that that thing look like?
It looks like a shadow, which, people think that when you see a ghost, it's just going to be a person, but transparent. But they're really just sort of shadows, but it's a shadow that moves in a way that shadows really don't. If there's one light and all of a sudden a shadow runs through the light when nobody's moving, it's...
Especially at like superhuman speed,
Mm-hmm.
you see the shadows. But ghosts, they can appear in so many different ways. Shadows are very common, but some people see ghosts that appear so solid they think it's an actual person until they notice that, for one thing, they shouldn't be in their bedroom in the middle of the night, and they're wearing clothing that's from out of the time period. And, sometimes it's just a vaporous outline, or...
sometimes they're a giant ball of light.
Mm-hmm. The light is, supposedly the orb is the easiest way for a spirit to manifest itself into energy and get around is in a little ball of, it looks like a little ball of light, and people capture those a lot on their cameras, even on videotape.
We had a question before we began about pictures, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but we have another viewer with a question for the Shadow Chasers, so go right ahead with that question. Well, we think we have a question. We're not sure.
Hey, hello?
Yes, go right ahead with your question, please.
My question is, throughout all their experiences in their investigations, what was the most weird?
That sounded a little like a ghost, honestly, but I'm not sure I got the question. I don't know if the caller is still there, but
I'm still here.
There you are. Okay, could you try repeating that again? We had an apparition in the middle of it.
Throughout all your experiences, what was the most weirdest one?
Okay, thank you. We understand that. What is the most weirdest one?
Probably, I don't know. I had an idea, but...
There's a lot of weird...
Pine Grove.
Pine Grove was amusing.
It's in Messina, and it was the first investigation that Cheri ever told us about. Usually if she sees, or if someone gets in contact with her about something that they want to put in a book, she'll have us come out and look at it and stuff and see what it's all about. And that was like the first idea that we ever got from her. And we went there, and it was fairly a typical investigation. We got some energy spikes, some orbs, and then all of a sudden someone said that something ran up behind them and whispered in their ear. And we were thinking, all right, this is a little bit strange, but nothing too major, until we start seeing a person-shaped shadow running around. And it would run past us, whisper in our ear, or scare us by pounding up behind us, and then it would take off.
And this was the point we were wondering about. We were actually making a comment about some of the ghost hunting shows that are on the air. And going, well, why do they end up going and chasing after a ghost? It's like, do they help to tackle it or something? So we're like, well, how does that happen? And at that point, we see the apparition running across the side of the cemetery. We're like,
and almost the entire team goes running after it.
We're like, did you see that? It just went that way, and then the ghost went back that way, and then we went back that way, and it went back that way. And just kept doing this for about an hour and a half.
It's like a live-action Scooby-Doo, we're all just chasing after this ghost.
Yeah. You mentioned orb. What is an orb?
In terms of photography, it can be artificial, or it can be a picture of dust, or it can actually be a spirit. And it takes a very hard analysis to actually understand what's what. And the way that it works is, well, we've actually been documenting this and testing our theory on this one too, is you see a lot of people that say, this is an orb. Well, you have a bunch of photographers that say, well, that's just dust. And other ones, they're like, well, there's a glow ball that just went by and I just photographed the glow ball. And they're like, what's that? And it's like, okay, that's an orb. But what is that? We've got our little idea of, do you remember the Charles Schultz sort of pig pen from Charlie Brown?
Where he always had that little dust cloud behind him. And the theory that we have is that each orb isn't a spirit. It's like a little dust ball of energy. They just have so much energy that they're constantly just
spinning off.
Yeah, creating little tiny balls of energy that kind of follow them where they go. So our theory is, if you figure out the direction that the orbs are heading in, and you move in the opposite direction?
Yep.
If you move in the opposite direction, you can find out where they're coming from. And we've tried to do that a couple times, and we've ended up with pictures that are just masses of orbs. It's just, they almost look like, it's just gray. Just the entire image is gray from all these orbs, and then you take another picture 2 seconds later in the exact same area, and it's perfectly clear.
Well, this relates to a question that our viewer, before we signed on, called with, and that is photographic evidence. I looked at one of the websites in researching this, and there were pictures of, I think you call them orbs. Somebody called them orbs. Is that, you have photographic evidence that this, whatever this thing is, exists?
Yes.
That's a typical one, is in 35 millimeter and in digital photography, they show up as orbs a lot of times, and that's where it's like you're just barely on the trail of the actual spirit that's there. You got this little cloud that's moving in one direction. You just need to get the other direction.
Orbs are kind of the lowest level of ghost photography, and then you move up to shadows, and then you move up to kind of like colored shadows, and then like the highest level, which you rarely ever get pictures of, is like a full body apparition, where you have a picture of a spirit that's so clear and so detailed, it's like you're taking a picture of a living individual.
So if you got Ichabod riding across the swamp, you'd really be, you'd have something then.
You'd be thrilled.
You'd be thrilled at that.
Very much.
Okay. We'll remind you, if you have a question for our guest tonight here on the new spirit of WPBS television, make sure you call us here at 315-782-8600. And when you do, please remember to turn down your television. That probably was much about the ghost as anything when that individual called. Cheri, how much of what you hear is folklore, is kind of historical expansion over time, or the real McCoy? Can you sort that out?
It's, I when I figure out how many stories in the 11 books, I'm up to the 10th and 11th now, I've written about over 550 different places. And I've written everything from brand new current situations happening. I've written, legends that have been passed on. And I've found legends that I was able to find old historical newspaper articles to actually add, some proof to those. So it's really a whole mixture. A lot, surprisingly, the last few books that I've written, because of newspaper archives being available online now, you're able to go back into the 1800s and see the kind of ghost stories that there were even then. And there are, especially in New York City, there are places that they were haunted then, and, sure enough, they're still haunted today, but there are actually newspaper articles from the late 1800s where residents were fleeing their tenements from haunted, from being haunted. And so it's a whole combination, really. There's, in each book I try to include mostly stories that are ongoing and are still haunted, but I do enjoy like the historical research and including, it's just really interesting to see how things haven't really changed all that much as far as the types of things that happen in haunted places. And
do you run into more skeptics than not? I mean, I'm a skeptic. I must confess. I've never seen a ghost. Well, some of the people I used to go to school with were a little bit. But anyway, besides that, how do you deal with someone who says, "Oh, phooey"?
I really, myself, I really haven't, maybe 2 times in the entire 7 years that my books have been out, has anyone actually come up to me and told me that they, didn't believe it. The others have